Is Toronto and the GTA the worst performing real estate market in all of Canada? And is it going to get worse? Well, in this video, we're going to look at a Better Dwelling article, which is based off of a BMO report, which looks at all of Canada and specifically the Toronto area plus its suburbs. And they also talk about what their predictions are for the rest of the year. And make sure you stay until the end because I'm actually going to bring up some other data which contradicts what they're saying. So which one is right? You tell me. Let's get to it. Hi everybody, my name is Connie Sarvanandan and I'm a real estate agent and active investor in Toronto and the GTA. And I think we should just get straight to the article. Okay, so this is the article. It's from Better Dwelling, and the title is Canada's Worst Performing Real Estate Markets Are Toronto and its Burbs. So Burbs stands for suburbs, and it's from BMO Capital Markets. BMO is the Bank of Montreal. So the first paragraph basically says, according to BMO, typical Canadian home prices are dropping, but the home price drops are much more significant in Toronto and its surrounding cities versus the rest of Canada. The next paragraph talks about the Canadian pricing as a whole. It's saying that the typical Canadian home fell to $760,400 in August, which is down 2.8% from the month before and down almost 12.4% from the market high in March. And they say that Southern Ontario, which is being hit the hardest. And what they're saying is, home prices are down across the board in Canada, but the speed and the depth, which is how much, is really varied across the country. And there is a chart in this article which is really good to kind of show that. So what does the next paragraph say? Okay, so the next paragraph really focuses on the chart, which is the basis for their whole article, which is home prices in Toronto and the surrounding region are falling the fastest. And basically what they did for this article is they took the February peak, so they took the national benchmark price from the February peak and are showing what's happening now based off of that February peak. So remember, February was the peak of the market. So we had unprecedented activity and unprecedented prices. And then after February, things started to cool down significantly and we were seeing a significant change. We were actually seeing declines month over month. August was a little bit of an outlier, which we'll talk about, but February was definitely the peak. So what they are showing is what's happening from the peak, not from a year ago, but what's happening from the peak. So what you will see is there are still markets that are still growing from the national peak, which was Victoria, Moncton, Quebec City, and Calgary. But then all of these markets have been declining since the February peak. And if you look at the red bar, that is Canada as a whole. And then all these cities that they're listing underneath the Canadian average is all in Ontario. So you have Toronto, and then Barrie, Hamilton, London, Kitchener-Waterloo, and Oakville. So what they're saying is it's becoming abundantly clear that the correction from February is hitting Ontario and specifically Toronto and the cities surrounding Toronto the most. So the next few paragraphs really talk to this chart, and what they are saying is, yes, we're seeing a correction across the board, the normalization of the market across the board, but where you are seeing the greatest correction is in Toronto and its suburbs, and specifically Toronto suburbs. And what they're saying is this is pretty typical of what happens in a cycle like this, where Toronto starts to become unaffordable, and so people start to look outside of the major city, and then they start, then there's so much activity that they forget what the normal discounts are for moving outside of the city. So in a nutshell, what they're saying is that the suburbs of Toronto are correcting the most, which is what they're saying here, because they grew the most, and so they have the most to correct. If you're finding value in these videos, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out, and it tells me specifically what kind of videos you guys want to see. And if you have any real estate needs in Toronto or the GTA, feel free to call, text, email, or WhatsApp, and we'll be sure to take care of you. And if you want to talk to me directly, my calendar link is below. So the next few paragraphs are saying regions that saw moderate home price gains are also seeing slower price drops. So they're talking about markets throughout Canada which didn't see as many gains as you saw in Toronto and the suburbs, and so they are dropping much slower and not as much. So you have Montreal and Ottawa are correcting in a moderate and orderly fashion, and then they talked about other parts of Canada, including parts of BC and Atlantic Canada, and then they specifically talk about Calgary, which they said, Calgary was already struggling, and so it never, even before COVID, and so because of the realities of the economics there, so they were saying that they never really got stretched, and so they're not as effective. They are saying, so this is pretty important, they end off the article with this paragraph, which I'm going to read to you. A mild August for inventory helped to firm the market, but that might be changing soon. September saw significant rate hikes, which will shrink budgets further. With further hikes still expected, most banks, including BMO, have forecasted home price risk further to the downside. So basically what they're saying is that the lack of inventory in August meant that the market was still pretty stable, but they are expecting with the interest rate hikes that are happening, especially since the last couple of weeks, that they're expecting a further decline, and they are revising their forecast to reflect that further decline. So what do I think about all of this? I think, as I've told you before, you really need to be careful about the data that you're looking at and what the article is trying to say to you. So I'm going to show you some data that contradicts what the BMO article is saying, and I'm going to tell you which one I believe is true. So in the BMO article, what they were doing is looking at the data from the February high, which was the highest point that we've had in the last year. So they took the February high and then showed the markets that were declining since the February high. Then if you look at the TREB, which is the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board data for the month of August, what you'll see is average prices are actually up 0.09% from a year ago. So basically, versus a year ago, the average prices in Toronto and the GTA is flat to last year. So which one do I think is right? Well, they're actually both right. And depending on what I'm trying to accomplish with you, if I want to tell you that the market is crashing, I'm going to use the February high. If I want to tell you the market is growing, I'm going to use year over year. Which one is true and what do I think? Well, this is what I think. So what do I think is true? I actually think they're both right in that BMO is not going to lie and the TREB data is not going to lie. I think it's all a matter of what people are trying to convince you to do. And what you need to do is take all of the data and make some decisions for yourself. And what I'm advising buyers and sellers to do is really look at their market specifically and then decide what's happening specifically in their market. Because looking at overall numbers is going to give you some indications, but it's really about your specific area and your specific pocket. And that's true whether you're selling a home in Toronto, because the different pockets of Toronto have been affected differently, and the suburbs. There's different parts of the suburbs that are also affected differently. Even if you go into Barrie, which was listed, Barrie has several different regions within Barrie, and you got to look at the specific area in Barrie to see how your pocket was affected. That said, I think you also need to pay attention to the market trends. So it's clear that February was the high. It's also clear that prices are coming down and they continue to trend down. Yes, August in Toronto was flat to last year, but the trend has been going down. We've also had another interest rate announcement. So, and we're going to hit the trigger rate. If you don't know what the trigger rate is, watch my last video, but those are also going to affect what's happening in the marketplace. And the best thing that you can do as a buyer is to understand exactly what you're trying to buy, see what's happening with those prices, and see what's happening in the areas that you're interested in buying. And then looking at what happened to the prices over the last 2 years, looking at the prices in the February peak, but also looking at the prices pre-COVID to see how much it went up and what came down. And for sellers, I would say to do the same thing. You have to understand that selling right now means that you are not going to get what you were getting in February. So you need to also be realistic about what you can get now versus in February. And you also should be looking at what you could have gotten pre-COVID and see how much it went up and came down. Because there's going to be a good time for both buyers and sellers, and it's really knowing about the data and understanding the data so that you can take advantage of the best time to sell, because the more you know, the better home buying and selling experience will be. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope you found value in this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, good or bad, I love hearing them. Last week I got a comment that said the music was too loud, and so we are going to turn that music down for this video. And then I've gotten all kinds of other comments of what's happening in the marketplace. If you believe that you can add value, I'd love to have your comments down below. And if you have any real estate needs here in Toronto or the GTA, feel free to call, text, email, or WhatsApp, and we'll be sure to help you out. And if you want to talk to me directly, I have my calendar link below, and you can set up an appointment, and I'm happy to have a chat. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate the support, and we'll talk to you soon.